Hi guys, today we're at the Classica Refugium near Stuttgart, not far away from here. It's probably one of the best kept places in the automotive sector, the Porsche Development Center in Weissach. And as you can see in the background, today we're going to give you a special insight into the heart of it, the Porsche Design Studio. We will unveil exclusively some studies that have been well-kept secrets up to now. So here's a little sneak peek for, stay tuned for our Porsche Talk Unseen. Hi everyone and welcome to the Porsche Talk Unseen. Great that you're joining us digitally. Yes, Unseen, that's kind of a motto of 2020, at least when it comes to real life meetings. All the more we are very pleased that you're joining us today virtually and hopefully in a very active way, because we're interested in your opinions and questions. So therefore, use the integrated chat functions and I will ask your questions at the end of the talk in the Q&A session. If you've got any problems with the chat function, you'll find a description in the invitation letter. Well, before we start, let me ask you a very private question. How many secrets do you have? 5? 10? 20? More? According to a study, you all have exactly 13 secrets. That's at least what psychologist Michael Slapian found out in a study with over 3,000 test persons. I'm pretty sure that he has a lot more due to his job, and I'm super excited that we will be airing some of them today together with him. So welcome Michael Mauer, Head of Design at Porsche. Hi, Michael.
Hello.
First of all, I have to ask that question. Do you have more private secrets or more business-related secrets?
That's a good question. Most likely more business-related secrets, and this is a pretty big part of my life.
So we help you today. We will be airing some of them, but we're not only just airing some of those wheeled models here. We also want to give the audience a little insight into your work. For example, how you use technology, how the workflows are. But we're not only doing that by our own. We also have a special guest for you. So stay tuned for the next 30 minutes. Yes, so let's start right away. Maybe first of all, I think we need a basic understanding of what you and your team are doing. So can you sketch or paint the picture for us, how you work from the first sketch until the market-ready model?
Let's say the design process is a very well-defined process with different steps, where you start with the idea that still starts with the sketching, either really with a pen and paper or digitally. Then these ideas are transferred into data, surface data, and then in our case a Porsche milled into either scale models or full-size models, physical models. So this process, as I said, very well defined. The starting point is different. It could be the successor of an existing model, then it's very well timed. Or as today, when we talk about studies, you could say the starting point is slightly different.
You named already the digital part of your work, and I think it's very well known that a lot of OEMs are focusing very heavily right now on 3D models because you can save costs or try out crazy things. So how does it work for you?
I mean, definitely this process, or as well our process, is a combination of traditional process with physical models and the digital process. We at Porsche are deeply convinced that the combination, or how we call it, this ping pong, so we go from the digital world into the physical world and back, that this ping pong process is really, in the end, will help us to come to better results, because you see things either in the physical world or in the digital world. Sometimes you don't see things in one of the other worlds. And with this experience, you really make much bigger progress in the project.
So where do you feel more comfy? More in the digital world or more in the analog world?
Let's say due to my age, I feel definitely more comfortable in the analog world. I'm still sketching with paper and pencil. But you know, in the end, it is just a different tool. Still, as a designer, you have to have the imagination, the idea, and to bring it either to paper or into the computer. But for me, it's definitely the paper and the pencil.
Speaking of technology, that already hits nearly every part of our everyday life, and of course, the mobility as well. So when we think about those driving assistance systems, for example, radar or cameras, they already shape the exterior design. How much does it really influence your work?
I mean, as a designer, you have an idea for the shape and the character of the design of the car, but everything we do in the end is based on existing technology. In a way, we have to wrap it. And so sometimes it's really challenging, because all the components you were mentioning have to be part of the exterior design. But sometimes when technology is changing, for example, from the traditional combustion engine to the electromobility, that can offer and give us as well more freedom, since the components become smaller.
And I think this is a very good moment to unveil our first model, because technology plays also a big role at this design study. It actually prevented this study from being developed further, but I think you have more details. So let's unveil our first design study, the Porsche 919 Street. So here is the beauty, and I think you can give us some more details about.
Yeah, as I said, when we talk about studies for the future, it's the idea is always to travel really 30, 50 years ahead and see what is possible, and then going back, and that influences what we are doing today. And the starting point can always be very different. In that case, the starting point was the decision from Porsche to leave the Le Mans series, this LMP1 technology, which from the Porsche technology was extremely successful, was existing. And the idea there was, can we do a kind of street legal version based on that technology? And therefore, as you mentioned, the technology was existing, so the freedom in a way was limited. But then we were building around this car. And what is always our intention, that these models then are a starting point for discussion in the company, if it would make sense to realize this, to bring it on the street. And in that special case, it was as well the technology then was in the end avoiding to bring it to the road, because this racing technology is so complicated and highly complex that it would have been hard to give it really into customer hands.
Mm-hmm. According to brain scientist Gerhard Roth, 80% of the people are change aversive. That means simply that they don't like changes. And you have the master task, not only to find the balance between habits and necessary further development, but also you're not allowed to change anything which is connected to the DNA of Porsche and, of course, to the model. So can you tell us something about the non-touchable parts of the design of Porsche?
Yeah, again, this is, if we compare projects like production car projects, where we really have, based on our design principles or design criteria, we have certain things described that we basically don't touch. If we talk about this kind of visions for the future, since we go so far into the future, there are basically no conventions, there are no restrictions. Everything can be questioned. And by having this freedom, again, we collect some experiences that then might influence on our view on the current products. But it is to find this balance, to build up this tension between the history, the elements, the design elements, the design language is based on, and the task and the challenge to further develop it. So maybe that's really the most challenging part of my task, yeah.
But there are new things happening, and with the Taycan, the new sport cars era in an electric way came up. So what remained from the Porsche DNA still in the Taycan?
Yeah, I mean the Taycan as well, let's say the car as it looks like, in a way had as well its origin in one of the studies. But it started as a completely different car with a completely different technology. So we did just a, let's say, super sports car with 4 seats, but it would have been hard to realize this with the performance customers expect from Porsche. So then a couple of years later, we pulled it out again and said as a proportion, as an architecture, that would be nice for being the first electrical car. But we knew as well that the design language was not modern enough. And then we looked at other studies that had been much further in the future and took elements from these studies and applied it to, at that time it was called the 960 Turismo, into this Mission E show car and then in the Taycan. So again, it is, sometimes it's just a design element, sometimes it's the whole architecture and proportion. But again, if you don't go into so far into the future, you won't have this, let's say, findings, and you won't have this experience.
Yeah, but you always have to work in the future because you design those future cars. How long do you take from the first sketch to the market-ready model?
One of the last secrets of the car industry.
Yeah, we're going to reveal today everything, literally.
Yeah. So again, it depends as well on the characteristic of the project. I used to say the really intensive time in the design department is 1.5 years. But if you, and then it's a question, when do you start to count? And when is really the start of production? But I used to say whenever we present a new production car to the public, the new 911, then in a way it's almost an old-timer for the designer because we already started to work on the next generation.
So you started to work on the Taycan years ago, and let's say if you started more than 7 years ago, it was very quiet on the electric market, at least at the customer's side or on the customer's side. But you really hit the bull's eye with the Taycan. So how do you get the feeling for the upcoming spirit and the time ahead?
I think that's again the beauty of that we as designers get this freedom to go so far into the future, where I think it's as well a great sign of confidence in our work that the board members or the CEO, Oli Blume, just gives us a budget without knowing really what will be the result. But since we have done this, as I said with the Taycan, we were then, when the decision was taken to go into this electrical world, we were much faster because years before we had already found an architecture that we believed then is very well applicable to this new generation. Again, this going into the day after tomorrow and then go around there, develop scenarios and concepts, then do studies like this, even as physical models, as a base for a discussion. And with this findings that change your state of mind. And with this, you go back to tomorrow. And I think that's one of the keys for the success of the Porsche brand, that we do this.
So before we unveil our next models, don't forget to ask your question in the chat. I will ask them at the end of the talk in the Q&A session. And before we unveil our next model, we're going to unveil our next guest. And here is our next guest. He's a photographer and the editor of the magazine Curves, Stefan Bogner. Great to have you here. Hi, Stefan.
Thank you. Hi.
You were involved in that project from the very first moment. So tell us something. How did that project came about, and how much persuasion did you have to put into it to convince the people that it's a good idea to show all those insights into the sacred halls of the design studio?
Well, the birth of Unseen was while taking pictures already of some cars. And I know the Porsche brand through the 356, through the 911, through the race cars, Boxster, of course. And there's so much more going on in Weissach. I would call it the Weissach vibe. And there was a simple question while we had some good coffee at your studio. Why don't we show it to the public? A very easy question, actually. So that's how it started.
So you created a hashtag for right now, the Weissach vibe, very cool. But Michael, I have to ask you that. How many calls did you have to make to convince your colleagues and all the other guys in your office to say, yeah, that's a good idea, let's show it to the audience?
That's another secret, not of the car industry. That's my secret. There were some, let's say, talks, meetings, because it's very unusual for the car industry to show this secret stuff to the public.
Yeah, but we're so happy that you decided to do that, actually. And now we come to our next revelation moment. And I think we can lift here that. And I just tell the people that this is the Porsche Vision Spider. And maybe, Michael, you can tell us, what is the basic idea of this design study?
Yeah, again, always different starting points, but as well, based on the discussions during our espresso meetings, it's always this smaller, puristic, reduced car where basically the Porsche brand took its start. That's always something we are dealing with in that special case. And we have done different models. In that special case, it was all about trying to build up a relation to a historic car, the 550. And that was then the inspiration. And we took some elements like the painting or how the fenders are done. We took this inspiration from the back.
From the past, from the James Dean past. I see the sparkle in the eyes, and I hand over to you, Stefan.
I just, it's very nice. This car means a lot to me because I just do a book about the 550 Spider for 2 years already. And we just drove 2 cars on the Alpine Road. It's such a fantastic small car. And that's, I think, the DNA of Porsche is small and powerful and light, and this car reflects it perfectly. You know, it's not big, it's very small. It has all the little details from the 550, like the back here, the fender. You know, it's called Little Rebel, you can't see. You see all the air intakes. Of course, the color blocking silver red is so nice. So it's just, I think, a perfect new interpretation of the 550, of the legend.
I want to jump in with a question because I know your magazine from very cool cars on a curvy road, but now you have here a static car in a clean environment. How difficult was it to take those cool and fancy pictures?
Very easy.
Yeah, it was.
Because the design was so exciting.
You can't say anything different, I know.
Of course, I like them driving more, but the cars are so beautiful. And the concept was taking pictures at their birthplace. You know, we just had 20 meters around the studio to take pictures. But, you know, everybody who sees that car, even not moving, imagines his own picture. One is like, drives somewhere around San Francisco. The other mind is somewhere in the Alpine Road. So it's okay to not drive it.
So, Michael, the origin idea or the origin car you looked at was the 550 of James Dean. So, what impressed you most and inspired you most of that car back then?
Yeah, you know, in general, if we do a design, one thing is just the surface treatment and the design. But we always want to express and let's say influence the fantasy of customers that look at the car. And I mean, again, James Dean as an actor with the 550, I mean, this is really an experience at itself. And as a designer working for Porsche, you have to look back to that car because it's not just the shape of the car, it's everything that you, let's say, connect with this. And we wanted to bring all of this feeling, even though none of the designer who worked on this was born at that time back there. But that was the idea, to bring this into the design of that car, that when people look at it, no matter if it's driving or standing around, that you immediately have all these pictures in your mind.
Maybe you can show us some details here, what is very interesting from your designer perspective.
Yeah, again, what I said, I mean, first of all, and as Stefan mentioned, it's a small, very compact car, which is really a challenge. We were talking about technologies with today's technology, so very compact. Then as well, details where we wanted to introduce new design elements, for example, this headlamp. I mean, the 550 Spider had these round headlamps. So that could be maybe the next evolution of that headlamp. Then, as we said, with this color scheme, very subtle hints to the past. Then on the back again, it is the treatment of the surface, the tension that is in these surfaces is typical Porsche, is the modern characteristics. But again, with some elements, you can easily see the connection to this 550 Spider. And that's how we try to do things, even when we look back into history, that it is not a replica, but it's a modern interpretation of the theme back there.
So, Stefan, if I allowed you to take just one picture of a detail of the car, what would you choose?
I would choose the back.
Again.
Yeah, again the back. I love this detail. You know, it's of course something Porsche lovers like, you know, because they know what this means. Yeah. So I'm going for this line.
Okay.
And Michael, you've been a chief designer at Porsche since 2004. That makes you only the third chief designer after Ferdinand Alexander Porsche, and he is well known as a functionalist. So do you have that spirit always in your mind when you design cars and even when you test things with your design studies?
We try hard, and I think whenever you have a car or a brand like Porsche, when cars has this performance, you even have to stick to the functionality, because an air intake has a function. Either it's cooling from the engine, from the brakes, or it's aerodynamics. So I think we very much live this culture and try to give each and every detail a function. But as I said as well, even the design itself has the function to excite people.
Stefan, what was your first thought when you saw that car the first time?
Wow. Very easy, actually. Yeah. Yeah, drive it right now.
All right.
Yeah.
So at the end, I want to know, because it's a design study, which information did you take out of it to use it for other design studies, or was it just like, oh gosh, this was a playground for designers and it was so cool, but we can't use anything of it?
So that was definitely the case, that we had a lot of fun working on this. Again, it shows that we as designers have a very good idea how we can further develop the design language, the surface language. We showed as well that a small car could be very attractive. And as I mentioned with the headlamps, even in the details, there will be a lot of inspiration for future products. But still, as a designer, you always hope and keep your fingers crossed that your ideas once hit the road.
And I think that's a good moment to come to our last, but of course not least, model or design study of the day. I'm pretty sure that there are a lot of questions upcoming right now, so please type them into our chat, and I will ask them at the end in the Q&A session. And now is the moment. I can say it's one of my favorite design studies here, and I think it shows also the craziness of the designers. We'll come to our last design study, and I'm pretty sure that some Porsche experts out there are asking themselves right now, am I still in the right live stream? What should be underneath which Porsche? And because it's so brilliant, I hand over for the revelation part to Michael. Maybe you can tell the audience what's underneath this cover.
Yeah, underneath this cover we have the Vision Porsche Renndienst. Which is even written here on the side. The interesting part of this concept is that in comparison to the other studies, it was a completely different starting point. So it was really, we put out the question or the challenge, how far can you stretch the Porsche design language? Is it possible for a car with this size, with this proportion, with this architecture to apply and further develop the Porsche design language, that in the end, when you look at the car, you immediately have the feeling that it is a Porsche. And when I look at the car, I'm still very happy, and I think we managed this pretty well.
I have to admit, when I heard about that design study the first time, I was not sure if that is working. But when I see it right now with my own eyes, I have to say, here comes together what belongs together. But in the end, Stefan, you have to sell that to the audience, because in the social media part, it's all about feeding the audience with the stuff they want to see. What do you think? Is it a tough task to sell this car as a Porsche to the audience?
No, not at all. I mean, Renndienst is one thing everybody knows. Then imagine a trailer with an old ST or RS in the back. You know, imagine some surfboards, skis, snowboards there. I mean, like, this is, for me, it's a dream come true, actually. When I saw it, I ordered one. You know,
so just put my name on the list as well.
Okay. I have two kids.
persons.
You know, this is a car which I actually need every day. So I don't think there's any doubt people would flip out for that car.
So maybe they will flip out even more when you tell us something about those details, Michael.
Yeah, again, as I said, challenge was we have a design language established on our production cars. How far can we stretch it? So the approach here, since you have pretty big surface, was really to build up a certain tension in the surfacing, very reduced, very puristic, but again, having this tension. And then one of the major parts was really to emphasize on the wheel arches, because that gives this kind of sporty feeling and give that car in this mono-volume vanish segment this kind of Porsche characteristics.
Mm-hmm. Stefan, you're also the man for the details. What details did you like most when you saw it the first time?
The first time, I liked the surface the most. It's like one surface which goes around. It's so beautiful. It's like attention also. And I like the front very much.
Not the back side this time?
I like the back side also.
Also, but
the front, I like the lighting very much. You know, I like the lighting design, the intakes. And if you look on the front, of course, I like the one-seater in the middle. This is like a super sports car for me. So it's all world in one, I would call it.
I mean, just regarding the headlamps, I mean, I'm glad that you're mentioning this. because I mean, this is really when we worked on the Taycan or the Mission E, which was the show car for the Taycan. We were very much inspired by this idea here, how we could further develop our design language on the headlamps. And what you see today on the production car, on the Taycan, has here its starting point.
Yeah, it's like the electric era with what you can see with the headlights, kind of. But when we're taking a look back into the year 2004, when you started, what has changed since then in terms of those design studies?
I mean, a lot of things have definitely changed if we talk about the process, the possibilities with the digital world. We can go into virtual world. We can play this ping pong. So definitely things have changed there. We became faster. We have more possibilities. What didn't change is really this mindset, this spirit, this Weissach Porsche vibe, where say everybody is really is enjoying looking into the future, exploring all these possibilities, and in a way is as well very open to question things. So this didn't change, and I think is really the key for the success of the brand.
Talking about this Weissach vibe, this hashtag, Stefan, you're going to publish some photos of this project on your social media channels. What do you think? What will work best for the audience?
I have no idea. I think every car is so special. Every car will find its audience. I mean, it's 15 cars. So I'm totally open. I will be surprised how the reactions will be.
Yeah, and some of the audience maybe will check out your Instagram profile and they can like and vote with their own opinion. At the end, I really have to ask that question because as I learned today, it's not only for the design part, it's also about learning things for other technologies, for future. So how do you decide what to take and what to toss? Is there any checklist you use where you say, yeah, this is going well, so we take that? Or is it more like gut feeling?
I think there are a lot of people, the decision makers in the big companies that would love to have this list, because then it would be pretty easy to take decisions basically saying, okay, this project most likely is more successful than the other. So I think this is not possible, or at least I can't do this list. So the big question is then, if you go into this future, if you go into this day after tomorrow, then first thing is you explore there everything. You develop scenarios, concepts, and then you have basically different possibilities to approach these future requirements. And then in the end of the day, it's really a question, how do we then in the design department decide? And honestly, I think it's just the intuition. But that's based on experience of many, many years. And maybe designers have this, since they always work in this kind of fantasy world in a way. That's a kind of experience, but it's a guts feeling, yeah.
So he's literally the man of secrets, because I think if you had this checklist, you wouldn't reveal it to the world. I'm pretty sure about that. Stefan, what design study, what would you wish for and why? I mean, you saw a lot of studies already, more than we can show here, but is there any study left you would love to see?
I would like to see a drone, a two-seater drone, a silent two-seater drone to fly, because I think that's the next step of transportation, will be flying. You know, people do wingsuits already, unbelievable 30 years ago. And actually, I would like to have a cargo bike, a cool Porsche cargo bike because I'm living in a city, would be a challenge.
Big inspiration for me already. These are completely different starting points to talk about studies without wheels or just two wheels. Let's see.
Yeah, you can see it as an official request right now. At the end, I have to ask one question, because today the mobility sector is more becoming like a smartphone on four wheels. So the interior design is increasingly important to the buyers. So do you have already some interior design studies, or is that just a thing for the future?
No, definitely. I mean, the, let's say, interior experience is part of these studies. And even if it starts like this car, there is an interior. So for each of these studies, we have ideas for the interior. But at the end of the day, a few of our secrets we should keep for ourselves. So wait and see.
At least for our next talk, unseen. So you have to keep those secrets. But we're going to answer some of the questions, and this is where we hand over to our Q&A part. So it's not a smartphone I use, but it's a tablet, and there I have the question from our Q&As here. So the first question is, how many studies had been developed so far?
A lot of studies. So as
I don't know if it's in general for Porsche, or since you've been the chief designer.
It's part of our daily business, so to say. So over the year, we always develop, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 studies in different stages. Either it's just a sketch or a full-size model. So it's an ongoing process. And over the year, yes, there might be a couple of models.
So how many have you seen already? Not just photographed, seen.
All of them.
I don't know anymore, actually.
A lot.
Must be more than 20.
You know, the problem is he knows basically all of them.
Okay, so here's the next question from our chat. Can you mention 3 design elements you believe we will continue to see on a Porsche model in 2050? Are you still working there?
50. Now I have to go back because we are already in 2060. I mean, as well, hard to predict, but some main design principles, again, if you talk about how we treat surfaces, I think we will still see in the future. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why we do these studies, to further develop it. And so we are not yet in 250.
So from a perspective of a Porsche addicted and a photographer, what do you think, what should remain until 2050 and ahead?
Ooh. Well, I think the logo, of course. Because I think it's
brilliant.
It's brilliant, timeless. I have no idea, actually.
But that's a
maybe
good
fly
keyword.
line or something. But
It's a good keyword, the logo, because there's another question. The red bus has a new Porsche crest. Is that holy, or could you imagine a further developed crest in the future?
I mean, I'm very grateful for this question, since it really shows the character of these studies, that when we do this, there are no restrictions, even the badge. But if you would go back in history, you would see already how often the badge has been changed and further developed. Here we took the freedom just to do another proposal. Yes, it's definitely something with the badge, with the crest, with the logo, you are very, very carefully. So I think that will take another, I don't know, maybe 50 years before we see such a badge.
Speaking of challenges, there's another question. What is the most challenging design of Porsche?
The most challenging, I mean, the most challenging part is really if you have a brand like the Porsche brand with this strong history, where you always try to create a connection to the past, but still try to be progressive and, let's say, keeping the design language very fresh. I would see that this is really the biggest challenge for us designers.
So what is the biggest challenge for a photographer? Which model is very challenging to capture?
like from these we have seen in the book, it was this one actually.
So why?
Because the surface, it's a one surface model. There are hardly any shadows to play with, so that was the hardest.
But I think you did a good job.
Thank you.
So next question is, how do you decide which sketches will make it into a clay model and which will be kept in the computer?
I mean, again, there is no, let's say, existing list. It depends really on the project. It depends on how much we are convinced that this would have either a chance to be realized later, or, for example, in that example here, where we really wanted to find out how far we can stretch our design language. You can't do this in a virtual model. You have to do a physical model really to experience this, that you are able to touch it. So there are different criteria, but it's from each project to the other project different.
So here's a question. It's quite similar to that we talked already about, but I want to ask it anyways. What design feature is untouchable for Porsche? The logo, the badge, we talked about that.
Yeah, but even there, as I tried to explain, that has been changed slightly over the years. And these studies basically show that all the design cues we know today have to be modified and further developed for the future in order to still have a very fresh design language. And if you would like to push this process in the first approach, you have to, let's say, challenge every design cue. So there are no restrictions, and then you go back. But again, I think these models show you can go pretty far into a new world of design languages.
Next question is, what importance does design have for the brand, and is this changing?
Now asking the designer, I would say it's the most important part. But again, it's always the whole package. But the design of the car, first of all, is the first thing that you see on the product. It is not just the shape, it is as well the message that is behind it. So design is important for creating brand identity, and by this building up a brand. And as a designer, again, I'm deeply convinced in technology. It will be much tougher in the future to differentiate brands by technology. So I'm as well deeply convinced that then design becomes even more important in the future.
So from your perspective, what do you say? Is that fact changing, that design is important for a brand?
Yeah, it's getting more important, definitely.
So
you can see it in the past, it's getting more and more important.
So a good position for Porsche, I think.
For designers.
For designers and for Porsche. So your job is saved. Next question is a very interesting question. What's the motivation behind making Porsche unseen? And I think the keyword is today.
Today. I mean, that was not, the Unseen project was not really a normal project, I would say, with the starting point, and then we knew in the end basically there's a start of production in now mid of November. I mean, as we tried to, it was an idea that started, and then since it is very unusual, there was a lot of discussion necessary, a lot of meetings, agreements, and then you could say, since we have gone through all these gates in a way, then it was just realizing, and then it was pretty fast. So you could say in a way by accident that it happens now, could have been happened as well half a year ago or maybe half a year later, but we were deeply convinced that this is a good idea, and we are happy that today we can show some of the studies.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy as well, because I've never seen such studies before in my life, and I'm sure the audience out there as well. There's a question, and I think we have to reveal it. You have got 15 design studies in the book, right?
Yep.
So taking those, if you could pick 2 out of these 15 studies and bring them into production, which ones would you choose and why? Maybe Stefan.
Okay, this is my new family car. So this is number 1. And the 904, the Vision 904. It's the 1-liter car. It's a very small car, sports car. Beautiful. I would go for it.
So maybe I can ask you the last question, which was also integrated in this question. What model are you most proud of?
That's like asking the parents which of your childs you're most proud of. I mean, whenever you're involved in the project, that's your favorite baby at the time. So I would say I'm proud of all these models. First of all, that we were able to do it, that we succeeded as well with this really challenging project here or other projects. For me, since I love driving and these small and puristic sports cars, for me, all these studies that deal with these small and puristic sports cars are maybe my favorite category of cars.
So I think we're running out of time, but I have 2 questions left here and I want to ask them you. So the next question is, what do the Vision Spiders elements point to with respect to the future production cars?
As well, hard to predict. There are a lot of elements, and maybe even now we don't know which elements we will use in the future. But it will definitely inspire us. But it's hard to point out now details.
And we also talked about it. It's always a learning and failing, and also things which are not working are also good for you to know. So I think it's difficult to answer those questions, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, but again, doing these studies is part and is showing that it's not so easy to build up a relationship to the future.
So here's our last question from the audience. With Porsche's lineup much bigger now than when Michael joined in 2004, what does he think is the biggest challenge with giving such different cars all that distinctive Porsche design feel?
I mean, it is challenging as a job, no question about it, but it's part of our profession to define what are the design principles that you can carry and apply to different type of cars. And I think we have shown it in the past that it is possible. We are showing this with these studies. So again, from my point of view, there are no limitations, and it's partly business as usual for a designer.
But not business as usual for us. So thank you so much for all these insights and of course for all your answers. Also, Stefan, thank you very much. And of course, thanks for your questions. And if you're hyped right now about that project, I've got some advices for you. The Porsche Newsroom publishes a series of articles about that design studies and of course also the Web TV format 911 magazine. So stay tuned for more to come. And Stefan already has it in his hands. If you are a Porsche fan or you at least know one, here's a good Christmas gift. The Porsche Unseen book is published now and it's available, for example, in the Porsche Museum shop. And if you say, yes, I really enjoyed that unseen experience, digital and maybe in the future also with that book, but I want to see those studies on my own. You have to be a little bit patient because in 2021, the museum will show an exhibition with a selection of those studies. So until then, stay healthy and see you then. Bye.
Tuned.